doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.
Thank you. I guess in a way we are, but perhaps let me just give you a little bit of context on who Africa 50 is. So Africa 50 is an investment platform for infrastructure, which has been operational for about 6 years. We are owned by 30 African countries, 3 central banks, and the African Development Bank. And they created us and purpose-built us so that Africa could grow and build its infrastructure under the control of Africans. So that was the main aim. And we have, although we are owned by these countries, they have deliberately and with a lot of foresight made our investment committee independent. Let me repeat that. They made our investment committee independent. So we make investments which are independent of political interference. So investments that make commercial sense. Over 6 years, I believe we have done projects which have a total value of over $6 billion total funding. And we have done a lot of projects. It's across the continent. I think one thing that has been talked about quite a bit that I'll address before I get to the 911 call is this issue that some people say there's not enough projects, other people say there's not enough funding. And this is a bit of a chicken and egg story. But if you really get down to this, what is the actual issue? As a lifelong financier, I know that a positive IRR project will always attract capital. So there is no shortage of capital. If you have a positive IRR project, capital will find you. You don't need to look for capital. So the issue is that it's difficult to find positive IRR projects. So Africa 50 has built in-house a project development team, which is highly resourced as opposed to many companies which do not have those resources. And we build projects from the ground up also. And when those projects are built without cutting corners, then the business I run invests the late stage equity into it. So that is a way of getting this done. Now, the real problem really is, and this is something where MDBs can come in, is the problem is that, as Vera said, the ultimate customer often does not have the ability to pay for the service or the goods that are to be provided. So that's where blended finance comes in. That's where MDB support comes in. Those are very, very important. I'll just give a sense of how we are able to sort of de-risk projects. So even though governments own us, they're not going to do us any special favors, and we are not going to ask for any special favors. But the perception of risk in Africa is far greater than the reality of risk in Africa. Okay, in fact, in my experiences in Africa with ministers, with my good fortune with heads of state, people are all business. They are very focused on tasks, way more oftentimes than in other countries that I have seen. So that is there. What we are able to do is provide that connectivity and access. So we have lots of portfolio companies. And if one of our portfolio companies has an issue, we're not going to solve the problem for them. The government will not solve the problem for them. But we have the ability to get them in touch with the right people who will look at it. And if it is reasonable, to address the issues. So I would say that's how we are a potential 911.
Raza is part of the problem, not the rating company. The rate was so low that people already imagine that we're so risky.
Perhaps, but
that's the view of Moi Ibrahim, by the way.
No, so
if you were here, that's why we want to be here.
I'd like to say that capital and rating companies are agnostic. They don't have an ideology. Okay, they're not out there to get anyone. The issue is, for example, if you have an FX issue, okay, now the basic rule of project finance is that any risk should be owned by the entity that's best able to cover it. It's very difficult for a foreign investor to take steady risk. Okay, so we have to find the right entity who takes that risk. And if we find the right entity which could be an NDB. Okay, it could be one of these sovereigns who are trying to build out infrastructure in Africa. If they are going to own that risk, perhaps the ratings won't be that low.
Doing business in Africa, you can't afford to be without Africa Investor.